Come back, you'll get better. Oh man, how you guys doing?
Good.
Feeling good?
Yeah.
Enjoying the smoke, breathing in deeply. Barbecue, delicious. Close? Yeah. Pine trees. All right. I hope a lot of you can make it Sunday. It's going to be a fun time. We're going to share stories. And if you want to hear the real stories that happen that we can't share in public, you'll have to get one of them to talk. It won't be me, though. It won't be me. All right. Let's pray. And hope the front row stops laughing at some point. I'm not holding my breath. Father, thank you for this place, this group of people. Thank you for the places you've taken us and the opportunities you've given us and just how we've met with you and how we've had chances to serve people. And it's just a cool summer. It's been overwhelming how good you are to us. I pray you'd help us to listen tonight, to tune into your heart and your word, and just paint a picture in our minds of how incredible you are as we close this series out. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Well, it has been quite a summer, hasn't it? I have loved hanging out with you guys. Those of you who signed up for Fast Food and Friends and went to lunch with me at different fast food places, and there was Grayson who snuck in every single time. So, yeah, good job with that. A lot of us went on the road trip together. We were stuck in a car for hours and hours and hours. Got to find out all sorts of cool things. Got to find out which of you hate hiking with a backpack on. Pretty much everybody. Pretty much everybody. No names will be said. And it's the smoke that makes me cough. And then
some people like being pinched by crawdads.
Some people like not just being pinched by crawdads, having their nipple pinched by crawdads. Grayson, thank you for that moment.
Spiders are scary.
Let me tell you something. I've taken multiple youth groups to Packwood Lake before, and almost every time there's a guy who catches a crawdad. So you're that guy. And thinks, I wonder what would happen if I attached this to my nipple. There's always a guy. There's always a guy. Our group is no different. We just got back from Hawaii. Trip. Got to surf some kids. Got to move 4 tons of lava rock. That was pretty cool.
That was so hard.
Yeah, guys. Yeah, you ladies helped out a lot with that.
We cleaned the inside.
Guys are like, I thought we were going to be snorkeling on the beach this whole week. What did I sign up for? There's mice running out. I'm not even exaggerating. There was a centipede the size of a hot dog. It was that long and about that wide. They're very poisonous and very dangerous. And so we cut up into 1,000 pieces. Actually, we technically let them cut up into 1,000 pieces while we danced like. Afraid. This is the afraid dance. That's how that goes.
Drink it.
And we've had a great time Wednesday nights. Our series, Chasing Waterfalls, which we're going to have the last message for tonight. Next week we'll have our community groups, and then we'll launch into a new series for the fall. You guys will go back to school. So exciting, so exciting. So let's make the most of these last couple weeks of summer. Let's have some fun together. Let's learn about Jesus. And we're going to start with a question.
Yes.
So this question has bothered me a little bit. I've been wrestling with it all summer, and you'll see why. So on planet Earth, this marble that we call home, there's currently just about 8 billion people. It's a lot of people. 8 billion people. When I was born, it was well under 6 billion.
What? You're old.
I know.
It's like 30
That's not because I'm old, it's because it's going fast. That was the point.
But he looks
Back
like
in my day.
Back when I was a
So out of 8 billion people, 2.4 billion of them, over 1 in 4 people, believe in Jesus and put their faith in Jesus. That is more than all atheists, Hindus, and Orthodox Jews combined. Follow Jesus. That's crazy that happens 2,000 years after he walked on this earth. And so my question is that I want to wrestle with and I want to deal with a little bit is, why on earth is Jesus so popular? Why on earth is he so popular? Now, I don't want you to answer that. I just want you to think about it. And a bunch of you came up with cute little churchy answers that are probably true. So good job. Pat yourselves on the back.
Thank you.
But I want to dig into it a little bit. Now, if you go on Google and you type in greatest people of all time or most influential people of all time, and you look at different lists, and I've done this. I've looked at Forbes lists, I've looked at different lists. Number 1 is always Jesus. Jesus is the top of every list of the most influential, of the 3 or 4 that I looked at. Why? And when you think about his life, when you think about what he did, it gets even more confusing. And that's what we're going to talk about, and I'm going to explain it. Because there's this formula for greatness in history. There's this way that you make a name for yourself. There's a way that you gain influence over the masses, and it goes something like this. It typically starts out with doing whatever it takes to get in positions of power. Step 1. Do whatever it takes to get in positions of power. Step 2. Get the biggest guns. You're right there, the biggest guns.
Got nothing on me.
Now, it doesn't matter if it was a spear or a crossbow or a cannonball or an airplane, or what I mean by biggest guns is whatever the biggest weapon is of the air, whatever causes the most destruction. You got to get a bunch of those, whatever that is, if you want to be great. And then the third step is you start looking for people to conquer, nations to conquer. You make your kingdom spread. You rule over as many people as possible. It's happened over and over and over again throughout history. Some of you are going to learn about some when you take history in the next couple weeks in school. Just throw that reminder there. There's going to be more. There's going to be more. Brace yourself. It's coming.
Her parents won't allow it.
History.
I love
Push her back.
All right, listen up. Come back to me, people. So, when Jesus started his ministry and started calling people, and what he did was he found a couple people that were not the smartest, not the strongest. They weren't generals, they weren't commanders, they weren't politicians, they weren't anybody. They were actually kind of outcasts that weren't good enough. And they were teenagers, by the way, about your age. They were fishermen. And when he called them, they had sort of a concept of this path to greatness. Okay, because they had seen it around. In fact, the nation was conquered by Rome. And so Rome had just come in, and you would have known the story of how rulers came into power, the story of how they got the biggest guns, and the story of how they took over your country, and they ruled over your country. And here's this guy coming along saying, I'm going to start a movement. Ooh, a movement, huh? Like this? Like a coup, right? Like a takeover, like a new kingdom, a new step towards greatness, a new king. And they're excited about this. They're pumped about this. They're waiting and watching for how Jesus is going to make this happen. And they're pumped because they're with him. They followed his call. So if he becomes great, they become great. They get to be in charge. They get to be powerful. One of the interesting things is that the way Jesus interacts with water, remember that's our series, Chasing Waterfalls, the way Jesus interacts with water could have got them even more excited about what was in store for his kingdom. So let's look into this a little bit. First step, let me explain. Do whatever it takes to get into positions of power. So for instance, there was a ruler, one of the Roman emperors, his name was Commodus, and he was like pretty much like all the other emperors of Rome, where he loved to drink a lot and screw around a lot, and he was pretty violent, and he was power hungry, and he grew up with a couple of friends. One of his friends' name was Cleander. That's a cool name. When you grow up and have sons, you can name him Cleander. Although after you hear the story, you probably won't want to. So, Cleander was actually a slave that began to work for Commodus and became one of his closest friends. And then when Commodus became emperor of Rome, he made Cleander second in command. And so this is what Cleander did. He got a little jelly of his buddy. He decided that he should be in charge. So listen up, guys. This is the scheme he came up with. So Rome could not grow enough grain to feed everybody. So they had ships full of grain that came from Egypt, and their entire food supply would come from Egypt on a regular basis with these ships of grain. So Cleander decided that he would stop the shipments of grain, starve the entire nation of Rome in order to make Commodus look bad, and hopefully they kick him out and put him in power. So he was willing to starve and murder thousands and thousands and thousands of people, his own people, in hopes of being put in charge. And history is filled with this. Do whatever it takes to get into power. Doesn't matter how much suffering or how much hurt or pain you cause. Do whatever it takes to get into power. Then you have Jesus. Now there's a strange story that you don't hear about much, but it's in Matthew 17, and somebody comes up to Jesus and asks if he's going to pay taxes. It's kind of an interesting moment. Will Jesus pay taxes or not? And Jesus tells one of his disciples to go to the lake, look for a fish. It would have been so awesome following Jesus. You'd be scratching your head all the time going, what on earth? What are you doing? Go to the lake, find a fish, look in its mouth. And so he's like, all right, I guess. So his disciple goes to the lake. There's a fish there. He opens its mouth. It has the exact number of coins in its mouth that Jesus needs to pay his taxes. Which means Jesus can come up with as much money as he needs to buy whatever positions of power he needs. And then it gets even better. I mean, speaking of fish, right, this is the popular story that Jesus was with 5,000 people, probably maybe thousands more than that, because they may have just been counting the men, and all they have is a couple fish and a couple loaves. He has his disciples pass them out, and they multiply, and he feeds 5,000, maybe 7,000 or 8,000 plus people. So imagine his disciples knowing what's going on. This dude can get whatever money he wants, to buy stuff, to buy positions of power, to buy people off, and he can feed the masses, which makes the masses happy and makes them want to put him into power. This guy is going to be an awesome king. This is going to be amazing, right? Look what he can do. Next step. Second, get the biggest guns. Yeah. Like, who has biceps?
Oh, yeah.
The biggest guns. So, for this one, I want to tell you a story of the emperor of the Ottoman Empire. His name was Mehmed. He was 21 years old. Really one of the largest empires on the planet, and he had a problem. And the problem was there was a city called Constantinople that was in the most strategic point where he could not expand his empire without taking out Constantinople. No big deal, right? Just take one city. The only problem is it had been attacked over 21 times, all failed over a course of 700 years. People had been trying to take it over, including his father, which was a great general and a strategic mind, couldn't do it. Nobody could do it for 700 years. Now the reason was that Constantinople had a massive moat around the outside. So you had to be able to get through water. And then it had the biggest wall in the entire world. And behind that wall was another of the biggest walls in the entire world. And behind that wall was even another of the biggest walls in the entire world. It had 3 layers of walls inside the moat. And nobody could take it down. It was this huge city. It was really important to the Roman Empire. Lots of gold, lots of wealth. So this is what Mehmed did. He made cannons that were the largest cannons the world had ever seen. They were right around the size of a school bus, these cannons. And the cannonballs were about the size of those tables over there.
That's a big cannonball.
That's a big cannonball.
How did they lift them?
That's a big
It took a number of soldiers on every single cannon, on every single ball, yeah.
They hold them on my head.
It was a crazy undertaking. And when they came up against the city of Constantinople, they fired those cannons over and over and over again for weeks and weeks and weeks until they finally put a big hole in the wall, went through, took it down, and he became one of the greatest emperors of all time at 21 years old because he took down Constantinople. In Mark 4, Jesus is in a boat with his disciples, and there's a storm outside, and they're worried that they're going to get shipwrecked and they're going to drown and they're going to die. They're freaking out for some reason. And Jesus is asleep. Again, it's always an adventure following Jesus. You never know what. It's like, we're all going to die. Where's Jesus? He's taking a nap. No big deal. So they wake him up. And you would think his response would be like, oh, sorry guys, yeah, we'll go figure this out. No, his response is like, what's the big deal? What's your problem? Calm down, everybody. Don't you love that when you're super stressed out and someone's like, just calm down a little bit? It's really helpful, right?
To get your anger.
Oh, thank you for reminding me. Now I'm calm. Nope, that's not how that goes. You want to punch him in the face. So, the moms are all nervous laughter back there. We never want to punch people in the face. So Jesus wakes up. He's like, guys, no big deal. I got this. He walks up, tells the storm to be quiet, and it stops. Just like that. You know what that means? If Jesus can speak and make a storm and lightning and waves and wind stop, he could probably speak to make a storm, lightning, and waves start. Lightning is pretty big guns. So again, if you're his disciples, you're thinking, he controls lightning.
He's Thor.
Nobody is going to mess with us in this kingdom. Nobody's going to mess with us if this guy can control storms. He's going to be invincible. Third, you conquer other nations so that people will honor you. There's a lot of this going on throughout history. So, for this one, I'll tell you a story of a guy named Julius Caesar. Baller when it comes to emperors. Baller. That's what he would have said back then. That's an ancient term. He would have walked in like, look, guys, I'm a baller. Step down. So Caesar takes charge of the nation of Rome, and people don't like him. So they kind of band together they do some different conniving behind his back, and they get him thrown out of the position of power, and they try to put him in this area in the western part of the empire, where they can like get rid of him. Like, you can have a city over there, you can run that city, stay out of our hair. We're good. You go there, don't come back. So Caesar gets his army together, and he decides, I'm going to take over Spain. Like that. And at the time, in Spain, this is a few years before Jesus was born. At the time in Spain, they had this tribe called the Germanic tribe, and there was hundreds of thousands of different villages and tribes. They weren't exactly united, but they were rough and strong and powerful. They had big weapons. And he's like, I'm going to make a name for myself by taking these guys out. So he goes to battle. He's winning. He's fighting. His men love it. They're plowing through the nation of Spain. And they get to this part where the commander of the Germanic tribe is stuck in the city. And he has 30,000 troops left. It's still a pretty good-sized army, but he's got 30,000 troops left. So Julius Caesar has his army build a wall around the entire city. They just build it, like right there, with trees and stuff. I don't know. Whatever you build walls with. I've never built a wall like that.
I built a wall.
You built a wall?
Out of clay.
Out of clay. I don't think it was clay. But congratulations on your clay wall. So he builds a wall around the city, he traps them in the city, and guess what happens? The Germanic tribes get word out to other tribes on the outside. They assemble an army of over 100,000 soldiers. Caesar has less than 70,000. And they're coming from the outside to get rid of Caesar's army. So you know what he does? He builds another wall. And so you have the city, a wall around the city, and another wall to protect his army from the big army. So his entire army is stuck between two walls and stuck between two armies. Insane. Not as insane as Isaac.
Okay.
So he has armies coming from two different directions, and he beats them both. He beats the army on the inside, 30,000 men. He pushes back the army of 100,000 on the outside. He beats them both, beats them into submission, takes their land, conquers Spain, and it becomes the largest conquest in Roman history. And then when he comes back, he knows that they don't want him in power, and they're freaking out at this point, because they're like, everybody knows Caesar's a baller. What are we going to do? We don't want him in power. And so he crosses the Rubicon, big moment, because basically he's like declaring war on all those people that kicked him out. And they run to Greece. Now here's the thing about Caesar. He had to cross the Rubicon, cross water to get to Rome. He had to find a way to cross the ocean to get to Greece, because he's got to get rid of these rulers or he'll never take charge. So he builds boats. He has his soldiers build boats. They go across the Mediterranean Sea to Greece, take on the army, and kill them all, and he becomes ruler of Rome, emperor of Rome. Big part of Caesar's success was being able to cross water. Guess what Jesus could do?
Walk across it.
Jesus could walk on water. And not only could Jesus walk on water, but he can help his followers to walk on water if they believed in him. Imagine the expectations. This guy, I'm getting pumped, guys. He can feed everybody. He's got tons of money. He can control the weather. We can walk on water. Wow. Wow, indeed. I mean, at this point, they're probably thinking, this guy is going to be the greatest ruler of all time.
He knows what's going on.
He knows what's going on. But listen. There's a problem. This is where the story gets even crazier than the crazy that Jesus already was. Jesus never once uses wealth to get in positions of power. He never once uses miracles to take over kingdoms. He never once hurts people with the weather. He never once feeds people to get political gain. And as far as conquering nations, in his entire life, Jesus never traveled more than 60 miles from where he was born. Most of you have traveled many, many more miles than Jesus ever did. He has the tools, he has the ability, he has everything he needs to outshine Caesar and Genghis Khan and Alexander the Great and Napoleon and all of the pharaohs and every other ruler throughout history. And he doesn't use a single one of his tools to get political power. Check out this passage in John chapter 6, verses 14. When the people saw him do these miraculous signs, they're excited, and you know why now. They exclaimed, "Surely he's the prophet we've been expecting." When Jesus saw that they were ready to force him to be their king, he slipped away up into the hills by himself. So the people are watching this whole package of what Jesus brings to the table. They want him to be king. They want him to be ruler. And he actually sneaks off so that they can't make him king. What is going on? Better than a Disney movie. Sorry, Gene, but it's true. It's true.
Anything's better.
Oh! I didn't say that.
Well, take that back.
Can you guys please wait to fight till after the service?
Anything's better.
Okay, listen up, guys. Let's bring this thing home. So listen. He walks away from every opportunity at the typical path to greatness, and now 2.4 billion people worship him. I mean, look around. There's no churches to Alexander the Great. There's no buildings where people gather to worship Caesar. There's no groups of people that sing songs to Napoleon. And in every town, in every state, in every country, almost without exception throughout the world, there's people worshiping Jesus. In the thousands. 2,000 years later. The rise and fall of kingdoms, the rise and fall of philosophies, the science, the Enlightenment, the atheist movement, everything. And this movement just keeps getting stronger. Why? How could that happen? In John 14:9, Jesus said this. He says, "Have I been with you all this time, Philip, and you still don't know who I am? Anyone who has seen me has seen the Father. So why are you still asking me to show him to you?" He's talking about God the Father, and so what Jesus is saying is, I am God. If you've seen me, you've seen God. Now, lots of people claim to be God. In fact, I've met some that think they're God. That's very common for people to think they're God. What's not common, what's impossible, is for anyone to prove it. So then Jesus takes it a step further. John 14:6. He says, "I am the way and the truth and the life, and nobody comes to the Father through me." So Jesus is claiming to be God, and he's claiming that he is the only way to get to heaven. Put your faith in me, accept my forgiveness, and follow me, and that is your only shot, your only chance to get to heaven. He made these claims, and he walked on water, and he caused fish to give out coins, and he fed 5,000 people, and he calmed storms. Then what he did next was a massive disappointment to all his followers. Because they're so excited about this new kingdom. And man, when Jesus was arrested and beaten and whipped and crucified on the cross, you cannot imagine the confusion and disappointment and darkness that his followers felt. We gave up everything for this guy. What is going on? We know he's got the power. We know he can do whatever he wants. We know he's got this crazy stuff that happens. He's only 33 years old. Like, what is happening? It all must be a lie. It all must, like, this is why in all of history, in all of mankind and womankind, every event, every war, every political leader, every rise and fall of a kingdom, every natural disaster, every important event in history is small compared to this one thing. It is the moment when Jesus rose again from the dead. Because when Jesus rose again from the dead, it validated everything he said he was, everything he taught us to do, every path that he laid out for us to live, every way that he loved people. That was the game changer. And you know what else? When his followers saw him rise again, it suddenly clicked. This isn't about a kingdom now, this is bigger. This is huge. And they started to live like him. Instead of looking for political power, they started going out and spreading the message, and they started putting their lives on the line. They started facing suffering. They started going to places where they were unwelcome, and many of them even died. Now here's the thing. People will die for a cause. They'll die for a faith. They'll die for a religion. That's what happened September 11th when the planes flew into the buildings. People were dying for their faith. But they won't die for something that they know is false. They won't die for something they know is false. Over 500 witnesses recorded seeing Jesus come back to life. And many of them gave their lives to stake that it was true. It's true. So you're getting ready to go back to school. Oh, shoot! Why you go rid of that? I'm so pumped about Jesus, you had to say that. Crap. Listen up, guys. Listen up. Isaac, troublemaker. I'm kidding. Mostly. Just kidding. So you're getting ready to go back to school. And listen, here's the thing. You are going to be putting together a strategy on a small scale of your own little greatness in your own little community. You are. You've already been thinking about it. You're going to have some version of questions like, how am I going to get noticed? How am I going to get attention? How am I going to make new friends? Or how am I going to keep the friends I have? How am I going to do on my grades? And what's that going to mean for my future? How am I going to do in sports? How am I going to look? How's my practice going to pan out? How's things going to go with my girlfriend or my boyfriend? Or how am I going to find a girlfriend or boyfriend? In some small way, you're going to choose an example to follow for your own path to being loved and being great. And in a small scale, it's the same kind of choice between Jesus and all the others. So you can choose to lie and cheat and steal and do whatever it takes to get into the positions that you want, or get the attention you want, or to get whatever it is you want. You can show off your privilege or your fashion or your stuff or whatever it is that you think will get people to love you. You can be aggressive or bully or be nasty or gossip and tear people down because it kind of helps build you up and it feels good. You can do all that to seek greatness. Or you can choose to follow Jesus' path to greatness. And you can care for others first. You can call out the best in people. You can raise up people around you instead of tearing them down. You can tell the truth when it hurts and take the consequences because you care about your integrity. You can trust Him with the things that you need. And some of you have families that you're just like, you don't know where certain things are going to come from, or your parents lost a job, and it's a huge stress. And we can just begin to walk that out. This epic story that you live out in your small community, in your school, in your family, with your circle of friends. Which path am I going to follow? How am I going to get attention? How am I going to be noticed? How am I going to be successful? And I hope that you're inspired by Jesus. Because the crazy thing is as much as it's different from every other approach that people use to reach greatness, it worked better. Because all the others are gone. And we're still talking about Jesus. Years ago, there was a school shooting. It was one of the first big school shootings. They're unfortunately, tragically, a lot more common now, and we need to pray about that and look for solutions. But one of the first big ones was at a school called Columbine, and it was a ferocious, evil event where a group of people that were outcasts, that were made fun of, that were bullied, strapped on bombs and automatic weapons and whatever they could get their hands on, and they just went after students. They just mowed them down. They locked the doors. There's videos of it, and it's the worst thing you've ever seen. Like students crying, begging for their lives, and these guys just heartlessly taking them out. And there's this one girl who maybe was the most famous of all the kids that attended Columbine. Her name is Cassie. And the shooter held his gun to her head and said, "Do you believe in God?" And she said, "Yes, I do." And then he shot her. And she died. A moment in America where someone was given the opportunity to deny their faith or lose their life. And this high schooler put everything on the line and essentially said, "I'm with Jesus. That's what I'm going to follow." And what happened after that, aside from all the sorrow and all the pain and suffering, as a nation, the whole nation was hurting. We all saw the news stories. We all saw the pictures. We all saw, the crying families. But what she did created this movement where, churches began to draw in more people, and people began to ask about her example, and people began to say, who is this Jesus that somebody would give their lives for? There were thousands, tens of thousands of people that gave their lives to Jesus or came back to Jesus because this one girl followed his example. It's unbelievable how he used that. One person that went to school said, "I'm going to be like Jesus. I will let his example be my greatness." And it was. It was great. It was totally different than everything else the world teaches us to do. So I just want you to bow your heads and close your eyes and take a moment between you and Jesus, and as you think about your future and your legacy and your life, just what would it look like to pursue greatness by living like Jesus?